Welcome to the Utah Epodcopalians. Now, this is a podcast about our unique church, the Episcopal Church, in this land, the unique land of Utah. You can't use the word unique too many times when you talk about our church and you talk about our great land that we all live in. And today we are going to talk about not only what we do in this land as a church, but what we can do as citizens, as Episcopalians. And one of the things that the Episcopal Church is known for is advocacy. It's known for social justice. And actually, it's part of our resolutions in the wider church, and it's also part of our resolutions and what we do canonically in our diocese here in Utah. So this isn't just something that's brand new. This is part of the church's heritage and history. Now, the church also has a canonically appointed board commission, actually, the Peace and Justice Commission, that handles a lot of this good work. And we are so happy today that this is not something I have to talk about, even though I love talking about it, because we have the authorities. We have the outgoing co-chair of the Peace and Justice Commission, Rebecca Chavez-Houck, who I think a lot of us remember from the days in the legislature and other advocacy offerings. And I know she has spent so much of her time. Her lifelong vocation has been helping those who are marginalized, or community engagement. I think that's the proper word we can always use. And of course, Ron Barness, who is the current co-chair of the Peace and Justice Commission. And Ron has had, again, a lifelong vocation in environmental areas and in political areas. And we're just really lucky to have him. So I'm going to not talk so much, and I'm going to let our guests talk, and we'll just throw it wide open. That first of all, the Peace and Justice Commission, this is a canonically set up, actual official part of the Diocese of Utah. And so first of all, just in general terms, what is this commission? I know you've been very active lately. So somebody want to take that and just start out on that?
Sure, we both can. I'll go ahead and start and talk about the fact that we had been reconvened within the last year or so by a former Bishop Hayashi, convened us, reconstituted us as the Peace and Justice Commission. And in the fall of 2021, and gave us a charge to work on the areas of creation care and racial reconciliation. Those two calls were what we were convened to address. And so the two resolutions that we passed unanimously last year, the delegates of convention passed unanimously, were the work and brought forth with great endeavor and great effort and great passion by the members of our commission. They come from all the areas of the state. We have commissioners that are from the Basin. We have commissioners from the north, from St. John's and Good Shepherd. We have commissioners from the south and Moab, and all points along the Wasatch Front. So our diocese is well represented by commissioners on the commission, and they come with that passion and concern and not just affinity, but in many cases expertise in policy, how to address policy concerns that might be happening in our community related to creation care and racial justice to the table. So that's who we are as a commission, and I'll let Ron talk a little bit about one of the resolutions that we got started and that he shepherded with a portion of our commissioners last year.
Okay, Ron, I guess you're up.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, we started in the fall of 2021, and one of the passions of mine is the protection of our wildland in southern Utah. And I see that there's a theological warrant for this in the Old Testament from 1 Genesis forward, and then as a metaphorical exercise, I suppose, with Christ and his experience in the wilderness during all periods of his life and ministry. And so we wrote a resolution supporting the perpetual preservation of Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, which, as we all know, are controversial in the sense that they've been brought to national attention, and then the 8.5 million acres of qualifying wilderness on BLM land. In Utah, we protected the Forest Service land, the most famous being the High Uintas Wilderness, and then the Wasatch Wilderness, Lone Peak, Mount Olympus, Broads Fork, Twin Peaks, and then other Wasatch Wilderness in Timpanogos in the south and up by Ogden in the north. But we've never really exercised congressional authorization and protection of the BLM wilderness. There's been a lot of foot dragging in Utah for about 35 years. And I feel like this land deserves our protection, our attention. And I'm thrilled that the Episcopal Church brings its voice to these wilderness areas and their perpetual protection.
Now, one thing that this all brings to mind, and both of your passion and your vocation, how do we get involved? You know, I think, again, there's a feeling that often in Utah, politically or perhaps culturally or something, that we'll sit in a pew in church and we'll maybe even talk in coffee hour about whether it's Bears Ears or whether it's some form of justice, peace and justice issue, perhaps involving people that are marginalized in so many we can find. And we say, look, I want to do something. I want to do something as a Christian, as an Episcopalian, but as a resident of Utah or Northern Arizona for the rest of our diocese. How can one person make a difference? That just seems so outrageous odds. You know, we'll read the newspapers or we'll watch television news, something I try to do. But what do we do when we see this and we feel hopeless? What can we do?
Well, Craig, I'll reflect back on my experience as a state legislator and talk about how one person can make such a difference in advocacy, in reaching out, in telling a story, in helping legislators and policymakers understand how decisions they make will affect an individual's daily life. Or our community or the world in its entirety. Yeah. So, you know, people would often say the same thing to me about, how can that make a difference? Well, I will tell you that, number one, if they're personal emails versus sometimes people will do action alerts, which are helpful, but a lot of times with the action alerts, what we would do with our interns is just count them. How many action alerts of the same, if it's the same message. But if somebody put in their subject line that it was from a constituent, somebody that lived in the district that I represent, number one, and they would tell a personal story of how the public policy that we were reviewing was going to affect them, that, number one, those are the emails that I would respond to personally. I would stay up late till 2 o'clock in the morning and go through all of those of constituents that took the time to tell me how something was going to affect them or how strongly they felt about an issue upon which I was going to be voting. And that makes such a difference because it really does personalize it. So tell your legislator why you care about it. Yes, you can provide facts. It's helpful to have those facts. Yes, you might pull some talking points from an advocacy group on an issue about which you care. But if you can tell me personally why you care about it, that's going to go a long, long way. And if you are my constituent, someone who I represent in my district. So that's the first thing that you do. Number one, don't ever promise or overpromise something to a legislator in terms of information. If you don't know the answer, you can say, you know what, I don't quite know the answer to that, but I'm happy to find the information out for you. and then follow up. So if you're talking to a legislator or if they pose a question to you and you're not quite sure of the answer, don't guess. Don't guess. Find out the correct information or put them in touch with somebody, an advocacy group or someone who can provide the correct information for them. We have really a wonderful legislative at the state level anyway, a legislative website that we encourage people to use, le.utah.gov. Again, www.le.utah.gov. And if you take a look at that, you can navigate what bills are going on, when they're going to be heard in committee. You can sign up to testify on pieces of legislation locally. The other thing that I encourage people to do, if it's something that's very new for them in terms of reaching out to their legislators or testifying in a committee or just becoming an advocate at this level, is become an affiliate of another organization. The Coalition of Religious Communities does a wonderful, wonderful job of gathering people from a variety of different denominations to work on a lot of the same issues that we in the Peace and Justice Commission care about, primarily in issues of poverty, homelessness, housing, income inequality. Those are some of the things that they work on. And they do wonderful trainings up at the Capitol. They do a day on the Hill for all of the various denominations. I believe that the one for Episcopal Day on the Hill has already passed, but that doesn't mean that you can't join in on another congregation's Day on the Hill. So look for the Coalition of Religious Communities. They're part of the Crossroads Urban Center advocacy group. And it is really a great way to get started in statewide legislative advocacy, is to learn more about that coalition. They'll do the trainings. They give you the fact sheets with all of the talking points. Sure. If you're nervous about going up on the Hill, they'll buddy you up with somebody else that's done it before so that you don't have to do this by yourself the first time. So those are just a couple of things that I encourage people to do when they're doing advocacy. But really, it's just get started, and you start from the heart. You know what you believe in and you know what you care about. And that will come through authentically for legislators when you reach out to them.
Yeah, I'm absolutely amazed sometimes that in our state, which is becoming a lot larger, certainly than it was, than many of us remember, that there still is a personal access to legislators, that you go up and you fill out the little slip of paper and you stand outside the door, and lo and behold, when available or when there's something, that legislator will come out, and that's almost unheard of in some states. That now you might not get them to agree with you, but they'll meet with you. And I've had among people that I felt, and you talk about the CORC, the CORC coalition, where I've been up with some issues, and I know that legislator is not going to probably vote the way I would vote. But then on the other hand, they will talk to you. And I think that's important. Ron, you of course, meet a lot of people that you might not agree with, or they might not agree with you at times too. But how do you see that you do make a difference, even though you're talking to somebody that perhaps is on the other side, that there still is a value in that?
I've taken a little bit different course because federal land policy is in the domain of Congress. So our lobbying effort is not on Capitol Hill in Salt Lake City, but on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And I've been to the Capitol in D.C. lobbying on behalf of Utah Wilderness several times, and typically we're building allies in Congress, people who are not from Utah, who are supportive of the federal lands in Utah, because the lands in Utah belong to all the American people. Our national parks are the domain of all of us. But lately I've been involved in taking our resolution, the resolution that was passed by the Episcopal Diocese in April, and turning it into an interfaith joint statement. And Rebecca and I have started this effort with the rabbi at Kolami Synagogue, and we've made our way through the other faith communities in Utah and religions. And so far, we've got 12 religious leaders to sign on to our joint statement, which really mirrors our resolution. And I've gotten no negative responses from any of these leaders, including the Salt Lake City Catholic Bishop Oscar Solis, the Bishop of the ELCA Rocky Mountain Synod, Jim Gonya, Rabbi Spector at Kolami. So we have a lot of faith leaders who have signed on to our joint statement.
And also, of course, those who might be interested in more national type issues, as Ron has just brought up. The Episcopal Church has a wonderful Office of Government Affairs. And I've had the great pleasure of going to that facility. It's located next to the Supreme Court in a building owned by the Methodists. And it's a wonderful, wonderful group of lobbyists, and they are recognized lobbyists who do an amazing job. And so their website, which you can find if you go to episcopalchurch.org and then look up Office of Government Affairs, a lot of resources, a lot of places where, again, you don't have to feel like you're just that lone person sitting in the 8th pew on the right side of some parish, that you actually find that there are people that are willing to help and willing to be part of it. Also, it's a way that they will reach out and help an individual church. That's one of the things they'll do. And they will help. So if you're part of a church, a parish, or any of our congregations, and there's a certain subject that you perhaps might wish to have some assistance with, there are wonderful people that will help you and actually do some footwork for you in our national legislature. What are some of the issues that you see in our state today? If we can go back to kind of a local look here, our diocese, or in the secular language, our state, that really are just out there that we need to be, as Christians, as Episcopalians, as good people of the state, that we just need to get behind and to work on. What are some of the things you see? And I know this could take 4 hours,
Yeah.
but if we could just take one or two in what we can do and what is being done.
So I'll let Ron talk a little bit about the fact that we're going to initiate efforts to look at where we can be most effective in advocating on behalf of the Great Salt Lake, because that is something of great concern to all of us. On the issue related to racial justice and racial healing, we look at things like the criminal justice reform movement, issues related to education, to access to healthcare, to access to housing, all of those things that everybody deserves to have a good quality of life, calling to our baptismal covenant of seeing Christ in all persons. That's what we invite people to do, and think about those who are often left out and left behind from public policy decisions, and in those just basic needs facets, and where they can look at bills that address those, look at appropriations requests that address those, and start to advocate on, first of all, become aware and learn, and then understand the historical underpinnings of racism in our country and in our state and our community, and how it has limited quality of life for so many individuals that live with us day to day. And so that's what we encourage people to do, is learn more about those issues, and then take a look at legislation that either might help or hinder, because if it hinders, then we need to work as advocates to defend those among us that are marginalized against bad legislation, and ask legislators to not support those pieces of legislation. Issues related to trans youth recently, that isn't a specific issue that we've taken as of late with the commission, but in general, when we think about seeing Christ in all persons, we need to think about what public policies are adverse versus those that are supportive of our brothers and sisters that are all around us. And so that's what we encourage people to do.
I know we have some events in the church. We have a Kaleidoscope Day coming up about racism. We have certain other things that we can gather information. I know that we've had quite a bit when you mentioned some of the things with just so many issues that we have.
Craig, what I will lift up is, I'm sorry, I meant to mention this, that there are a number of our congregations as a result of our racial healing resolution that are starting to do the Sacred Ground curriculum, which is available through the Episcopal Church nationally. And so they're doing book groups, they're inviting speakers, they're doing storytelling, and they're starting to, and then yes, Kaleidoscope on February the 25th, and the diocese will be sending out information, and then I'll let Ron address some other things here.
We've interrupted you now all the way
That's
around.
okay.
We could have several other people interrupt you too, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to say that I feel like we've had great success with our wilderness resolution and turning that into a joint statement and enrolling and building a faith community around, interfaith community around the protection of our public lands. And we're working on another resolution. Hopefully we'll make it in time for the upcoming convention in Price. If not, then we'll work on it on a parish by parish basis, but a resolution in support of the protection of Great Salt Lake. And really it boils down to the lake needs more water. And these are all very complicated issues. But I think we need to boil it down to one fact that there's a certain amount of water that needs to go in the lake to keep the toxic dust under the weight of the water, and to bring life back to the lake, so that it gives rise to feed for the 10 million birds that call the Great Salt Lake home, either permanently or periodically throughout the year on their journey from the Arctic to Panama.
Yeah, the lake, for those of us who are a little bit older and recall a different time at the lake, and it just seems that it's impossible. But that's the problem, that we should have been protecting it in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s. And so that's why I admire what this commission is doing, because you're looking ahead for generations to come. Like I don't think we did as much. Boy, we're just moving through time real quickly. What can we do certainly to get involved with the Peace and Justice Commission? I think that's also of help to know, because of the work. Again, both of you have really emphasized that having a coalition, whether it's a coalition of religious organizations or people that think with you, or other people that there are those, and one of them is P&J. How can we get involved with that other than call you or something? But what is the process?
Well, for one thing is, I would find out if you have a commissioner already that is serving on the commission in your congregation. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there are a number of the parishes and congregations throughout the state that have a commissioner who has been appointed, and then reach out to that individual, find out what they're working on or how they're trying to move forward our resolutions or our issues within the congregation, and often to offer to help, offer to participate in things that they may be initiating, whether it's a Sacred Ground group, or whether it's, advocating on behalf of our Red Rock Wilderness resolution, or want to get involved in the interfaith work. So that's the first thing I would do. And then if you don't have a commissioner in your congregation, feel free to reach out to Ron in particular if it's something that is of interest to you. We love people with passion and who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do some good work, and just have a conversation with them about your interest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ron, we can get a hold of you through St. Mark's, is that right?
I'll give you my email. It's Ron, my first name, at Barness, my last name, BARNESS .co, not com, .co. So
Right.
Ron at barness.co.
We just have a couple minutes, and I know I want to have Brianna have a chance to also what is she not only records but listens and picks up on some things. But I just want to ask one more, and maybe it's a question for you, Ron, and that is, we pass these resolutions almost unanimously. What happens to that resolution then? Is it becomes something, I know we'll probably have more in price, and when we get together and meet on April 21st, what happens then? Does it give it a sense of authority, of power, of comment, that because it does become then the official voice of the church?
Well, we passed 2 resolutions from our commission in April last year, and one of them was the race and reconciliation resolution, which provided a roadmap for our congregations to take action at the parish level. The wilderness resolution was more of a statement resolution, but I'm really pleased that we were able to turn that into a public statement and get other faith leaders to join us in standing for the wilderness and the national monuments. And I think that there's really a lot of good, and there's a hunger out there. I feel from other faith communities that the Episcopal Church has brought some leadership in this area, and other church leaders were really happy to join us in standing for that.
Great. Okay, Brianna, it's your turn. You have 11 seconds. No, you can take a little.
Oh, okay. We got to get in there fast.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining. I think that we've learned so much good information. As a local member of a congregation, it's really good to know how accessible the Peace and Justice Commission is. I think I wasn't aware of the accessibility that I, just a member, could get involved. So I think that's been great to learn. And I'm really hoping that more listeners will get more involved.
That's what it's all about,
Me
isn't it?
too.
Yeah.
You had more than 11 seconds. We we're Episcopalians. What's the clock? It's just something that you put on the wall and periodically look at and really not worry about it. But and I know that, but that's a good point, that I think so many of us, and that was the original question posed, that we sit there and we have opinions, and perhaps our opinions are running contrary to some of the things we see in the legislature. Perhaps they're not. I mean, that's not a requirement of the Episcopal Church that you must not agree with the legislature, but I mean, there are times we do, or sometimes we don't. And I think that's what we've learned here today. Any parting enthusiastic comments that will make us actually excited about things that are coming up, or are there some things that we should be watching for on the calendar as we look at the legislature or events? Certainly the Great Salt Lake is really coming up, and I know the legislature is even calling what they call Water Week or something, but are there some moments that we really got to look at that website that you talked about?
Yeah. Yes, I would just, if you feel passionate about something, do something. That's always what I say. Don't just, you don't want to be regretting that you wish that you had at least spoken out. We are called to witness and to advocate. A lot of times people say, well, is this the role of the church? And yes, it is. It is. This is who we are. We are a people that speak for, as you mentioned at the beginning, the voiceless, for and advocate for the wonderful island home that we have as our earth. And it is just imperative that we as Episcopalians take it a step further, not just think it up in our head that, oh, you know, that makes me upset, or I wish I could do something, because you can. You have your heart, you have your voice, and you have your hands to write with, and to listen to the stories of people who are affected, because sometimes it's not you that are the messenger. Somebody else might be a good messenger, and what your job is to support them as they share their message.
Super. Ron, last word?
I echo what Rebecca said, and we've got some other great initiatives coming up in the Commission on Peace and Justice besides the Great Salt Lake Resolution. And we'll be announcing these things that we're working on shortly. And I think a lot of these new things we're considering will involve more people in the congregation level in the parishes and across the state.
All righty. Well, with that, we got to call it a day. And our wonderful guest of Peace and Justice, our outgoing co-chair, Rebecca Chavez-Houck, and of course, Ron Barness, who is co-chair now, Brianna, who always records and comes up with wisdom at the end that certainly after I've talked for so long. And I'm Craig Worth of the Diocese of Utah, and you've been listening and watching the Utah Epodcopalians, a podcast about our unique church in this unique land. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.